Hi Stefan, it's Matt Widgery. I've really enjoyed your podcasts, particularly the introduction to philosophy, which I found really engaging and a fascinating way to be logical and empirical and all the things that I've searched for a foundation for in my own search for knowledge and self-improvement and a way to understand the world around me for reasons I've explained in some of the communications I've already had with you through the email. I wanted to I've got some notes, so bear with me if I look down at the page a couple of times, but I just wanted to go through one of the points which I found fundamentally difficult with what you were saying in relation to governance. I think this is vital because one of the things that I am involved with is lobbying against government actions which harm the environment, for example, and there are infinite ways in which the governments obviously screw us around and mess with our lives, and I agree that in an ideal world they should be got rid of because they do more harm than good and so forth. But working through this logically and applying it to the real world in terms of how I have managed to come up with the thought process, I came up with a rather worrying perhaps end game from the theories that were put forward with a couple of your blogs. So I just wanted to go through what I thought about it and put this across to you, and hopefully you could come up with some further thoughts on this matter. So governments, you put forward the notion that they were unethical because they have a different set of ethics to the citizenry which they say that they govern, i.e. they have property rights and which are different to ours. They can take our property. We can't do the same vice versa. We live in a sort of non-aggression principle state of ethics, whereas they are allowed to use aggression to get what they want from us. They take money at gunpoint, they kidnap us, they've got police, they've got guns and government bombs and all that sort of stuff. Pretty uncontroversial, I would have thought, and I agree with that. In your environmental speech, talking about the dispute resolution organisations, one of the things that came up just at the end, actually, which worried because I was waiting for it all the way through, which was how you apply this in a statist society, in a society which already has an executive political force entity like we do. And one of the questions came from the back row, and I couldn't quite hear it because the video was a bit quiet, but the answer came back that the DROs can't function in a statist society. You have to assume that these things exist in a bubble. I'm a solution fiend. I work at these issues internally because I want to come up with solutions in the real world that can be applied to reality, to the now, to fix things, make things better, hopefully. So that was one alarm bell. Going back briefly to ethics, looking at self-defence, I'll come back to why that's important in just a second. Self-defence could be seen, as far as my interpretation of what you were saying, as a potential caveat for the non-aggression principle, i.e. non-aggression, great, but if somebody comes at you with a gun or a knife and you defend yourself and thump them in the face or take the knife off them, stab them back, whatever, you act with an equal force back at them, and that's less morally questionable, and in terms of the ethical manifesto that you were putting forward, that wouldn't be deemed as so bad. In fact, in some cases could be positively seen as being ethically okay to do that, to act in self-defence, to protect your property rights, your primary property rights, which is of course your own being, your own person. If you haven't got the right to defend that, you haven't got property rights over it in its entirety. So, if you have the right to self-defence, and it is ethical to defend yourself against your aggressors, and as we've explained before, the governments can be seen as aggressors, that would obviously logically, canonly, empirically, logically, and in terms of relating that to the real world, relate to self-defence being endorsed against the government, i.e., you can, if the government rocks up at your door and asks your tax money, you can, and they turn up with guns or whatever, you can match the force. Moreover, on a grander scale, in terms of working out the ethics, it would be possible to see how that argument could lead to one overthrowing a government. using force, using guns. So that's where I drew my inferences from in order to get to that particular point. And I wanted to clarify where you were coming from, because as you mentioned about a couple of podcasts in, when you started talking about ethics, these things lead to big amounts of people dying unless we get them absolutely clarified, absolutely spot on, absolutely 100%, because you really don't want to make a mistake at this stage. And I feel that this potential endorsement of the overthrowing of a government through violent means could lead to worrying things happening, could lead to somebody taking that on board and doing it. If, let's just accept the premise for a minute that is what you were saying, and that's okay, and we'll move on from that to the next state, which is obviously that you're looking at an anarcho-capitalist, non-statist, free market society with no government at the head of it. So if we are looking at defending ourselves against the status quo, against the political executive, the government, the military executive that is taking our money off us, that's kidnapping us, and replacing it with a non-statist entity, with no government, with no police, with no military, with no laws, with no controls, wonderful. If I could click my fingers like that, happy days, wouldn't that be great? But we have to always link this back into reality, into the truth of the senses. The truth of the senses is that if I was to overthrow the government and then sit back with no protection, with no security about my person, they would just come back. They wouldn't have demolished all the jails yet, and even if they had, they would put me in one, or probably more likely I'd be shot, hung, whatever. So in order to stop that happening, in order to stop the government just coming back, if there's nothing there to stop it, you need to have some sort of a security force, or to put it another way, you need to have some sort of an army. And if I have instigated an army, a security force, a police force, whatever you want to call it, around the borders of my society to protect the people from the government coming in and setting up this nasty non-egalitarian state again, I have governed them to do so. I am a government. So you see, obviously now I've got to a contradictory state. I have become statist in my efforts to overthrow the previous state. And I think that's what happens a lot of time in revolutions. The ideals and the reality haven't been forged together. Now, I've been working on this for the last week. You've been working on this for the last 20 years. So I assume that you have thought this through, and it is my lack of understanding of the principles by which you have stated these things publicly that has led to this misunderstanding. So I'm just putting this out there to ask the question. That's where I am with it, and I'd like, if possible, just to get some reassurance, or to take me to the next step, to guide me perhaps to where I need to be looking, in order to sate my own anxiety about the evolution of these ideas if they're put into practice. That's me for now. Thank you very much.